Hello and welcome to the IR Thinker, where we explore the world of international relations one critical issue at a time. I'm Martin Zupko. Today we are hosting an episode that provides an opportunity to present a research journal together with its editor. The aim is not only to introduce the journal, but also to offer a critical assessment of suitable venues for publishing research articles. We will also discuss the journal's intellectual identity, its DNA, publishing trends, common mistakes made by the authors, and issues that frequently challenge editors, editorial boards, and reviewers. In this context, we turn our attention to the British Journal of Politics and International Relations. The journal is a leading peer-reviewed academic journal in the fields of political science and international relations. Established in 1999 and published by Sage Publications on the behalf of the Political Studies Association, it has developed a strong international reputation for high-quality scholarship. The journal has 6 editors at the moment, all of whom are based at the University of Leeds in the United Kingdom. Today we are speaking with one of them, Professor of Global Security Challenges at the University of Leeds, Jack Holland. Welcome.
Thank you.
Jack also serves as a Pro-Dean for Research and Innovation in the Faculty of Social Sciences. His research focuses on United States, United Kingdom, and Australian foreign and security policy. He is expert on AUKUS. For example, he has been invited as a witness to the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and he regularly provides media commentary for British and international news organizations. Just to make this discussion fluent and without stress, I want to point out that at the time of recording, I have no manuscripts under submission or review with the journal, and this is stated in the interest of academic integrity and transparency, which I strongly support. Let's start with the first question. The British Journal of Politics and International Relations has now existed for over 25 years. If you had to describe the journal's intellectual DNA, what distinguishes it from the dozens of other journals competing in political science and international relations?
Thanks. Yeah, it's a good question because we're a big generalist, pluralist journal. That pluralism is really important. I value it a lot. There's a real belief in the mixed ecology of the disciplines and the need to value work across a range of methodologies and epistemologies. For BJPIR since 1999, it's been described as a premier outlet for British politics, but it also takes as its core political studies writ large. Sometimes we use the synonym of politics for that. So as well as the kind of British tradition of political studies, we'd also incorporate political science and more US and transatlantic types of work as well. The IR, similarly, it's international relations, but we would also see that in the tradition of British international studies, so a pluralist vision of what international relations can be as an interdisciplinary subfield. So we're pluralist, generalist, big, do a bit of everything. The British aspect's important. We publish a lot of stuff without the UK as its focus. I guess the middle of the Venn diagram of interests is how does the UK relate to those global challenges? And the politics of global challenges has been something that we've pushed as an editorial team since we came in 2021. The ideal type BJPIR article looks at the British role in the broader sense of challenges being faced globally. So it's that kind of Venn diagrams, pluralism, generalism.
And between international relations and political science, what's the ratio when it comes to articles?
So we don't operate on a quota system or something, and that's one of the things that we've noticed has changed since we've taken over in 2021. We're getting more and more IR. That's as the journal grows and the impact factor has gone up, we've attracted a broader international audience and a broader international authorship as well. I think if you look at what we publish, it's fairly balanced, with the footnote of the acceptance rate for British politics work will be slightly higher because the authors of that tend to already know the academic system in the UK. They'll know the journal. They'll have the comfortable perch in a UK higher education institution from which to write, whereas a higher proportion of our international authors won't have some of the benefits that come with that. So there's more hurdles to overcome. But yeah, we're pretty balanced in terms of what we publish. We've done special issues on both sides. And if you look at any of our recent issues, we always have work on the kind of political studies and international studies side of things.
Hmm. The journal was created as a flagship outlet of the Political Studies Association, which is in the United Kingdom. How does that institutional connection shape editorial priorities today? And is it an asset, a constraint, or both?
It can be both, I guess. For authors, the thing to think about is the need for an intellectual contribution in the article that is broad and generalist enough to interest the readership of the journal. And the journal is a PSA journal, so the PSA members get this sent out to them. And that's important. We also have a broader readership than that, but it needs to be more than a contribution to a specific subfield or a kind of specific empirical contribution to a niche topic. It needs to be generalist enough, and that's a function of who the journal serves, and it serves as well as SAGE. It serves the Political Studies Association. We could do things if we were not in that situation that would look different. So we could choose, for example, to publish fewer things with a view to driving our impact factor up. The reality is, if you are a journal that makes money for an organization like PSA, and we do, by making money in turn for SAGE, there are different commercial and economic pressures. So we couldn't just decide to publish less, to reduce the denominator, to reduce the impact factor and go up the rankings, because then you would make less money. And that would make people unhappy. It would bring in sort of existential questions for PSA's operating model. Instead, what we have to do is more difficult, which is SAGE and the PSA by extension would like us to publish more and increase the impact factor, which is hard to do. So you have to try to do it through the compound effects of publishing more with big issues, lots of eyeballs and social media attention, and hope that you kind of become greater than the sum of your parts and you do all of the things at once. And a few journals have managed to do this, and we're one of them. We're publishing about double what we used to publish, and the impact factor's gone up really nicely as well. Now ranked 14th in IR. Important to stress that while there's those economic pressures there, we have obviously got full editorial control. We never get lent on or told what to do by PSA. They don't bother us day-to-day running of the journal. That is us in a weekly editorial meeting, 6 of us working out what to publish and how to promote the journal, or how to enact an EDI policy or whatever else it might be. And you can see that we've published editorial statements at various points in our editorship. And this is very much our vision for the journal. So the politics of global challenges is something that we've brought in as a focus that marries up with what the University of Leeds is doing. PSA had sight of this when we pitched for the journal 5-6 years ago, but apart from that, they've left us to it basically. So we're endorsed in the vision, but it's our vision for the journal.
And just for people who are not familiar with Political Studies Association, how big is this institution in the United Kingdom? And does it have any members from international audience, or is it specifically for the United Kingdom? Because we know there are so many associations and various clubs and institutions. So I think it's good to clarify that.
Yeah, so it's the UK Political Studies Association, which is the biggest politics professional association in the UK. I couldn't tell you the number of members right now. You would have to pitch that question to someone who runs PSA and have a dig through the spreadsheets. But it's big. PSA works with other national political studies associations, such as APSA, which most people are going to be familiar with, the American Political Studies Association, and IPSA, the International Political Studies Association, and then various other national ones as well. So yeah, this is the UK PSA, the principal politics organisation for UK higher education.
And when you mention the sort of economics of publishing, I think for many people it will be interesting to know if you have sort of a maximum amount of articles in one issue. So for instance, you can publish maximum, 25 or 50. And is this sort of like any regulation that you are dealing with? Because you said people want you to publish more. More articles means more audience, also more money in some way, which is logical. But is there any regulation that this is your sort of ceiling and you can't go over?
There used to be, and increasingly there's not. So the publisher's no longer concerned about page numbers and things. And actually what we've tried to do, in part because we're a PSA journal, is to leave stuff on first view or online first for a shorter amount of time and to get it into an issue quicker. So we've doubled the publication rate. We're publishing about twice as much stuff off twice as many submissions to the journal. But we've also doubled the issue sizes. We've gone from 4 issues with about 10 articles in every year, pushing up. So the last one is about 20 articles. And that is just so things don't sit online first. And that's because as soon as they hit the issue, PSA will email them around or send them around to the PSA members. And people tend to see them quicker, which is useful because the views go up faster. They're often of contemporary relevance, so getting them out quicker matters, and it drives the citations and the impact factor down the line. So yeah, we've doubled the issue sizes. In part, it's because we're just not worried about the pipeline. So some editors could be nervous that, you want a year's worth of stuff stocked up in online first so that I don't know, if the apocalypse happens, there's another pandemic or something, you've still got a year's worth of stuff ready to go. We've got so many submissions now of such a good quality that we're just not concerned about that. So we've been whittling that list down and getting things out quicker.
As we mentioned, the journal publishes across international relations, political science, and it's sort of broad in scope. So logically, there is a question about how do you maintain intellectual coherence in the journal, because some people might say, oh, they publish everything. But I think this is not true, is it?
We publish a lot, and the coherence is partly just quality threshold across a pluralist reading of the disciplines. So yeah, it's things that make that more generalized contribution that's going to be of interest to a broad and generalist audience. Britain occupies a pretty unique role in global politics, and a unique role in the histories of the development of politics and international relations as well, political studies and international studies. So I think there's an intellectual coherence from having the British Journal of Politics and IR, given the UK's role, both in politics and in the development of the academic disciplines. But yeah, quality threshold as well, go with first and foremost.
I have one question from my colleague, and he asked me 3 days ago, how does journal keep the editorial board members, and what decides that someone is on this board? Because we know that usually it's unpaid, like reviewers and everything. It's basically all based on the will that we want to do something. And some journals, they have 50 members in editorial board. Some they have 20. So how is this in your case?
So I'll answer that at a few levels. Different journals have different models. Editor-in-chief, associate editors, international advisory board. Our model at BJPIR is, to start with, I'll talk through this. We've now got 6 editors, and we've deliberately called ourselves editors rather than editor-in-chief. We wanted a radical democratic model, and we initially began with 5 in case we needed to vote on anything. So we'd always have 3 and 2 and something would win, but we've relaxed a bit on that front and brought 6 in because we tend not to disagree too much. It's been fine. We were operating in sort of 2019, 2020 when we tried to bring the journal to Leeds. Quite a different moment for UK higher education then, a lot more money washing around in the system. Managed to secure the backing of the institution and our home school with some investment in our time. So we get about 10% workloading to do the editorial work. Costs the university money, but the university benefits from the prestige and research culture of having the journal located here. Harder and harder for universities to do that in the current economic climate. It is a different world from 6 years ago. We also had a couple of deputy editors on there, and that's because now we're all quite senior and getting old, but when we started, we were a bit younger, and we wanted a couple of very senior academics to act as deputies in case we had any unusual, difficult issues that we could go to them for advice. With Christina Lestan-Bandera and Justin and Evans, who agreed to serve in that kind of role out of the goodness of giving something back to the discipline. We then have a team of associate editors who we don't overwork, but they might get an article every couple of months to run through the process that's closer to their specialist area where they'd be interested in it anyway. So they would then have one of the main 6 as a managing editor, and they as an associate editor would, I don't know, maybe be in political economy, for example, but they know the reviewers better. So they would actually farm out the reviews and collate and advise, but the decision would still rest with the the core six. The next level from that is we maintain an international advisory board. We refreshed that when we came in. I think when new teams start with journals, new editorial teams, they have a vision for what they want to do. They also have people who they know will bring in useful expertise, and also people who are reliable and actually doing the reviews and don't just want to wear the BJPIR badge but not do anything, right? So you do refresh these boards based on intellect and expertise, but also the reliability of people tipping up and doing the work. There's no set number for an international advisory board or an editorial. It depends on what you're looking for. We targeted certain regions. We did this with EDI and Global South Reach in mind, and we found it effective. But I would still say 96% of our reviewers, that's a plucked out of the air figure, but a lot aren't on that international advisory board. We tend to go to the absolute specialists in the world, wherever they are. But the board is still useful when you need a review in an area done, or if it's assessing the best article prize, something like that. That's when those things can be useful. Some editorial teams use boards to decide on things like special issues as well if they run an open competition. So it just depends on the model.
We mentioned that 6 editors from 6 editors are based at the University of Leeds. Is there any special connection of this university to the journal, or just a coincidence?
No, we decided when the call went out, we'd been thinking about pitching for a pretty big journal for a while. I was previously involved as an associate editor of the team that edited the European Journal of International Security, which is BISA's second journal, the British International Studies Association. So we got quite good experience off of that, knew how publishing worked, and BJPIR was bigger in a disciplinary sense and in a how old the journal is sense, and in the impact factor sense. So it was a logical step up from being an associate editor on Aegis to going to edit BJPIR. We put together the team at the time that we felt was needed to cover the breadth of things the journal was likely to have to assess. And we've evolved and updated that as we've gone along. But Leeds have no pre-established special relationship with PSA. Now we have a relationship with PSA because we've been doing this for 5 years, so they know us well and we know them well.
We spoke about the methodological pluralism, and many journals claim that when you basically research them, and your journal says that you support those with the minority traditions or those who are discriminated against in some way, also from the countries that don't have that many opportunities to publish. So if someone is in that category, what's the process how that person can feel confident that his or her paper will go through the editorial board? Do you have any special channel for those people, or is it based on one sort of channel and then it depends how editors are going to assess the paper? How does it work in practice?
So we are genuinely pluralist. We do believe in that mixed ecology of what disciplines look like, methods, epistemologies, and value it across the board. And I feel like that's something that you learn with academic maturity, is to value the different types of work that are being done in the different subfields. That's very, very genuine. So in terms of the range of things that make up politics and IR, there's no preference for one approach over another. It all goes through the same submission process. It needs to meet the same bar. We're not a journal that only publishes quantitative studies of something. For example, we published the full remit, and that can be seen in the kinds of work we've published for the last 5 years. For the broader questions around EDI and regional representations, we've tried really hard on this front, and we've got better. We did a 25th anniversary special issue quite recently. One of the articles is looking at that diversification of author location, and we're getting much, much better. We're doing quite well relative to our peers, but it's an ongoing journey. There's still work to be done. As you would expect, we publish things from the UK more than anywhere else. And then countries like the US, Germany, Australia do very well, but we have growth areas as well. So growth from things from Turkey, from China, and from other regions. We've done a lot of on the ground sort of work, so getting out to conferences in different parts of the world. For example, to work with early career researchers in the Pacific Islands, flew all the way to Australasia to do that kind of workshop of ideas. But everything needs to go through the same submission channels and has the same criteria applied. You're obviously aware if someone is from an underrepresented part of the world, and you can think about that. So we've tried to marry up the need for the intellectual quality with the need to make sure it doesn't accidentally disadvantage scholars who aren't trained in those particular traditions because of where they're located. So a good example is if you publish in a few journals now, you're expected to have pre-registered experiments, for example. We haven't insisted upon that so that we don't accidentally rule out however many countries worth of academics submitting works where those things aren't yet a cultural norm. We would still expect it from quite large parts of the world that we get a lot of submissions from, but we don't insist upon it. So that's something very specific that we've done slightly differently to try to balance those competing demands of quality and openness with EDI in mind.
Looking at the submissions over the past decade, for instance, what major intellectual trends have you observed, and which of those trends do you think represent genuine advances in a discipline?
So when we took over, you've got to think this is BJPIR and this is Britain, 2020, 2021. We had a load of research in the journal at that time on Brexit. And Brexit was what was driving interest in British politics and British foreign policy at that particular moment. We also have had a huge amount of work on populism, as a lot of journals have, but we've had a lot of that here as well, whether it's comparative. We ran a special issue on populism and foreign policy that was done really, really well. It's had a lot of citations. So those two, Brexit and populism, were the early front runners for most popular things we're receiving submissions on. Things that have really risen that we've had to adapt to is the rise in submissions using quantitative methodologies. That's partly as we've shot up the rankings. We get much more quants, much more US-based quants, but all over. And we've brought in an editor with a quantitative specialism to help us to deal with that. We previously had 2 or 3 at associate editor level. We had so much we thought we needed to bring this in at the top level. Second real growth area is China, research on China and from China, but primarily on China. We brought in a new editor who is an expert on Chinese politics, China's foreign policy, to make sure we assess that as well as we possibly can do. That's been massively useful. Other growth areas around the politics of global challenges, we've got a lot more on climate change, and we had a lot on COVID, although that's dipped away a little bit again now. And the last one that I've noticed is the prevalence of ontological security research in international relations. That's a big theoretical intellectual trend.
Is there any discipline or area that editors would like to see more work to be submitted?
We've had some interesting work come to us looking at the prevalence or the lack of prevalence of the role of race in studies of British politics and in international relations generally. But perhaps IR's done slightly better than some of the BritPol has on this historically. So Sadia Akram has pushed the British politics type journals to deal with this better. And we are seeing some of that work coming in. So I'm personally quite excited about that there is that reflection, introspection of really high quality work on the role of race and racialization in British politics. Yeah, I think that's been something I've been keen to see.
Academic publishing has become intensively competitive. Have you observed changes in how scholars design and frame their work, specifically in order to get published in top journals? Because what we see when we open LinkedIn, Facebook, or social media, there are all those, I will help you to get published, or I have a special framework, 100% you will be published in top journals. Then you have those AI wave, like your paper will be 100% correct and all those things. And everything is creating sort of illusion that people can publish more easily in these days. But how is it in practice?
I think if I answer the question more in a kind of advice way, so we see more AI generated work and it doesn't get very far. That seems to be lowering quality, not raising quality. So that's something for early career researchers to think about. I would advise that there is the need to be strategic and instrumental with how you frame your contribution. Don't hide your contribution, put it up front. We should know from the abstract and certainly by the end of the introduction explicitly what the contribution to knowledge is that's being made and how it furthers the discipline. That's especially key for big generalist pluralist journals like BJPIR. Yes, the rigor matters. So don't be implicit when it comes to the data and how it's been analysed. You need to show the workings. It needs to be substantiated. But the contribution point is probably the biggest one that's missed by earlier career researchers who develop smaller, more implicit contributions to more niche sub-areas. This needs to be thought about at a more general level. To that end, on the IR side of things, which is where I am, theory does remain king in IR, right? There's been a critique of IR for a while of how important theory is, but it enables that more general framing of the contribution to the discipline to be made that moves you away from the specificities of case data. So those are things I would suggest to think about if you're looking to land something in a big journal in a really competitive era.
Let's put another layer on what you already said, and let's go to the editor's perspective on the common mistakes that authors make when submitting to the journal. So what would be, based on your experience, and I think you read hundreds of papers that wanted to be published, I think you can tell us maybe basic and more advanced mistakes that authors made.
The most basic ones, I mean, at the moment, if you use AI to exclusively write your paper, it's not going to go anywhere. Don't do that. But we do get people who still miss the remit of the journal. So bearing in mind how broad and pluralist we are, we don't desk reject on remit that often, but it does happen that we get stuff sent to us that isn't on what the journal does, the substantive sort of focus of the journal. It might be on something else that's sort of exclusively public relations, for example, but it's got the word relations, it's about something else, or business, or intercultural communication that isn't close enough to politics and international relations. So making sure you're submitting to the right journal is the kind of basic things to do. I think not framing the contribution explicitly at the outset would be a frequent mistake. There's a style, even to writing the abstract, to grab people's attention and make clear the significance of what you are doing. So it's somewhat formulaic, but I would recommend to follow that formulaic abstract style of the opening line or two sets the context for what is already known, and then the third or fourth line is establishing the frontier of what is known. So where is the limit? Where is the gap? Whereabouts is the contribution going to be located? And then you can articulate that, the specifics of the contribution that fills that gap of the limits of knowledge, rather than a woollier or more descriptive abstract that doesn't do justice to the contribution that you're trying to develop.
And anything else regarding more advanced mistakes?
It's so divergent because we get such a wide range of papers, authors. There are specific things that are infrequently done well. Lots of people run out of steam in a conclusion. So using your conclusion to set up an agenda of what's to come, to position your paper to have significance going forward. The implications of this paper for X, Y, and Z are A, B, and C, and future work might do well to explore whatever it is. I think sometimes students forget that they are contributing to an ongoing debate and explicitly signposting the directions that their paper might contribute to in the future can help it to be cited. That's something that, very, very few do well. I have seen, to flip your question around slightly, I can answer on both levels. In responding to reviews, this is volunteered, unpaid labour from reviewers who have gone to the trouble of reading your paper and critiquing it. You might not agree with everything, like it, or want to do everything. Acknowledging the work that's gone in with gratitude and politeness is really important. And what I've seen is that very senior scholars in the field are absolutely brilliant at bringing the reviewers into a dialogue such that the reviewer becomes invested in the publication of the article. That is a real art, to take your review comments and not just be grateful and thankful and appreciative of them, but to create a vested interest on the part of the reviewers to support the revisions that you have made as a sort of joint venture. It's an incredible way of writing, and one that I hadn't realized how good some people were at doing this until I become an editor. And you actually see all of the responses to reviews and the divergence in qualities of responses to reviews.
Sometimes we have an excellent researchers, but they are junior ones, someone who is just about to finish PhD, maybe postdoc people. And usually when they try to submit a paper, they have a certain strategy. And I would like to ask you, how would you encourage younger researchers or junior researchers to submit a paper to your journal? Because many times they see, oh, there is a professor with 20 years of experience. He wrote 7 books. He published in the best journals for the last 15 years. So how or who I am to publish in such a good journal? On the other hand, from my personal experience, when I was marking just the master's degree essays, I realized there are people with talents and with very good ideas, very creative ideas. So how to encourage junior researchers to publish, but publish in the way that there is the certain bar of quality and all the requirements are fulfilled?
I think it's a great question. I think early career researchers should be brave. Learning about journal rankings is good to be instrumental so that when you target journals, you're aware of the ones that are ranked most highly because they tend to be the ones that will increase your research visibility. So citations, impact factors all feeds into how many people will see your work, find it useful, cite it, and make use of it elsewhere. So going high to start with is a good strategy. At BJPIR, we publish work by everyone. We're not just publishing the work of superstar profs. We've just published a Barry Buzan article, but they're not all Barry Buzan articles, right? There's lots of people who've published their first ever article with us. Sometimes, if you get them fresh, the originality of the piece can be even higher because it might be coming out of the new doctoral research that's right at the frontiers of the discipline, might be new empirical material that a doctorate's responded to, could be theoretical innovation. But sometimes when professors have been doing this, and I speak now as a professor 5 years into the professor role, you've been doing this for a while and you have to keep coming up with new ideas. I think sometimes, especially in other disciplines, but also in IR, that freshness at the start of your career can be really exciting. And I wouldn't hold back. I wouldn't think you have to go to the subfield journal that most closely matches your niche topic. You can think about the broader significance of the contribution you're making for a wide readership. And that's a question of a bit of thought, a bit of literature, a bit of positioning and framing. It's the conceptualization rather than the fundamentalness of the research. So take the advice from your senior colleagues, but yeah, don't self-limit and go for it, basically, would be my advice.
How do you see the scholars from the global south publishing in the top journal in Great Britain? Because sometimes when I speak with my colleagues from Africa or, for instance, Malaysia or Indonesia, they are slightly, reluctant to even try to submit a paper because they have that sort of north-south divide, and sometimes it is more psychological effect that I rather publish in, let's say, South African journal or Malaysian journal than in the British one. So there is a big segment of those people, and with globalization and with the sort of geopolitical dynamics, I think we should also say a few words for those people because I see opportunity for them once they overcome sort of prejudices or obstacles. So how would you treat those people?
So we treat everything the same that comes in. It's read for the quality of the contribution that it makes. It's originality, the robustness of the methods that substantiate the arguments being made, and the size and scale of the contribution it makes to the literature it's trying to actually impact. We have been quite assertive on global south issues and trying to publish more authors from around the world. The data suggests we've been successful in that. I absolutely agree with you that it is harder for a lot of authors from parts of the world outside of the UK or outside of Europe or outside of North America or Australia, New Zealand, because the resources available might be less, or the training into the cultural norms of academic disciplines might be different. So I absolutely agree that there are more hurdles to be faced, but that's something we've been aware of in editing the journal, and it's why we've tried to be cognizant of those things. There's investment pots in place for things like help with not just copy editing, but the initial kind of working with an author who's might be working in their second language from a part of the global south we don't usually publish much work from. So I think there's three of these funds a year now where they'll get some dedicated help. If we think the research is good, but they're being limited linguistically, for example, we can put the money in to give them someone to work with and to work it up. And that's great. That's innovation on Sage's end, our publisher. So we are trying on these things, but absolutely, this remains a very large structural condition for how academia works that is difficult to overcome. Most of the top journals are trying, some more than others. I would hope that we've been one of the most proactive.
Every serious editor carries pieces they wish they had handled differently. Can you speak of something that used to be in the past, but at the present editors handled it differently and it helped to improve the journal's quality and also the work conditions for all of you, for editors, for editorial board and reviewers?
There's a few things that could be spoken about here. I like some of the things that we didn't change. To answer the question the other way around, we did quite basic things like we inherited from our predecessor editorial team, really good team up in Edinburgh. They met every single week in person to discuss the papers that come in that week, and the papers that were progressing and what they were doing. And that might seem like a lot of meetings, over a whole editorship. It is. You're meeting same time, same place every week. We decided to begin by doing that for continuity and as we got up to speed, and we simply haven't stopped. We still have that weekly editorial meeting, and I found that to be a fantastically efficient way to keep things moving. So the reason our average time to first decision is 6 days is because that's about as long as anything ever sits in the system before someone's read it and processed it. So if you submit to BJPIR and it's not going to go out for review, you're going to know on average in under a week. So I like things like that. I mentioned we'd done things like driving up the issue sizes. I think that's the right thing to do, and I think that's helping. And those kinds of things might seem obvious. If you're getting more submissions, publishing more stuff, surely you publish bigger issues to get it out quicker. But the number of meetings involved in doing something like that, and the number of analytical data steps before we were confident to go to the meetings to make the argument, it's a lot of pre-steps to eventually then change how you're doing the publishing model. And that, I think, has been effective. And hopefully when we hand over this journal in about 15 months to a new team, they will get the benefits of some of the things that we've done now. It takes a while to see the impact factor and the citations roll in.
I want to touch reviewers a little bit, because some journals, they recommend that while with submitting the paper, you should also submit 3-4 names for reviewers as a recommendation. Some journals, they don't have that. How does it work at your journal?
Some people do submit names, and some people submit names to people they really don't want it to go to as well. Authors are welcome to do that. We tend not to look at the recommended names. If there's conflict of interest or a strong recommendation of please don't go to person X, then we will tend to respect please don't go to person X. We wouldn't send it where there's a conflict of interest, but we tend not to go with recommended reviewers. We all work hard enough to find reviewers without that, and BJPIR is enough of a draw that we have been able to get, kindness of reviewers who are volunteering their time regardless. We put reviewers in who are in the right area for theoretical or empirical or whatever methodological reasons. I don't think there's any harm in doing it, and it might help you at other journals, but we don't tend to go with that.
The last question for today's interview, and this is sort of like free space or free room to express some sort of long visions for the journal, something that you would like to see in the future. And when I say future, I mean, let's say 5-10 years from now. And also something that you would like to maybe shape as an editor, some sort of process or processes. So please.
I mean, I think that journals and peer-reviewed publications are a vital part of democratic politics. Peer review, like democracy, is imperfect, but better than all of the other versions of the thing. I do think in an increasingly fragmented information landscape with misinformation, the role of peer-reviewed outlets like BJPIR and other journals is absolutely vital. I hope in the next 10 years, 15 years, when we look back on what we've been publishing and what we've done, so from 2021 to 2027, it will be, we've covered a lot of work on Brexit, on COVID, on climate change, on populism, done work on Trump, Nigel Farage, UK economic growth, as well as wars in Ukraine and Gaza. We've covered some of the real hot button issues of the day. And in a range of scholarship on those issues, we've done special issues on Trump and Ukraine. I mentioned the Barry Buzan piece on Trump that's just come out, considers the question of proto-fascism, really important piece. And I feel like everyone in the whole of IR and politics has tried to publish on populism in the last few years. So there'll be a lot of populism research to look back on as well. I'm really pleased that we published some of the professors, the scholars right at the top of the discipline, but I'm equally as pleased that we've published early career researchers with their kind of breakthrough pieces. So we've published some really good ECRs on climate change and things like civilian casualties in conflict, where the quality of the scholarship is really super, and you wonder where they themselves would be in their careers in 10 or 15 years. So yeah, as I said, we've got 15 months left, but I'm already very proud of the work that we have done. And we slowly turn our attention now to advertising, putting the call out for the next team to come in. And we're doing this quite early because the scope of editing a journal like this is big. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of groundwork that has to be done to set the institution up to be ready. And we will make sure we partner and pair up with the incoming team so that no paper gets lost in the handover process. So authors don't need to be concerned about that. That's why we've got kind of a 15-month transition plan to make sure business continues as usual.
Professor Holland, many thanks for sharing your insights on the journal, the quality of submitting process, reviewers, and all the things around that scholars are interested in. I wish you good success, good papers, and also sort of like energy to go through, because it's a very demanding process. And I think people who mark some essays know what I'm talking about. And this is, let's say, 100 times more demanding, because you also, in some way, decide about the destiny of scholars who have research, who have papers, and who want to publish. And when you have like 10,000 journals in the world, it's very important to publish in the good ones. Professor Holland, many thanks for being on the IR Thinker.
Thanks very much. Cheers.